Let's summarize this thing. The whole point that we're trying to do is lay a rational foundation of metaphysics of morality, is what they call it. I don't like the naming conventions because, right, they're talking about laws of nature and laws of man, and they equate them, right? Just like they equate metaphysics of nature with metaphysics of ethics. That really bothers me. Since, you know me, Hume's guillotine and all that. But I do kind of agree that on the goal, what they're trying to do, right? That when you create a theory of ethics, code of morality, I don't know what to call it. Yeah, when you create an ethic, maybe. An ethical theory, I like that. I think I agree with Kant that it should be based on being wholly a priori. Like the basis for it. Just like in maths. Maths are wholly a priori, right? The basis, the axioms of maths. Right, and that's pretty much where we've gone so far. Yeah, I kind of feel that the text is repeating itself and just saying this over and over and over again. Maybe it's some subtle differences that I am missing. That's completely possible, yeah. Right, start with the transcendental or general metaphysics of nature. Right, now they're comparing it to... Yeah, that is what's happening right now in the text. We're comparing the metaphysics of nature and look at how we could use the same type of structure in ethics. Right, this concerns the laws that make possible the concept of nature in general, even without relation to any determinate objects of experience. Wait, I remember reading this already. Alright, analytical and transcendental logic, such laws represented by the categories and their correlative principles provide an account of, as Kant put it, no, I've seen this already. In addition to the general metaphysics of nature, however, there's also special metaphysics. Alright, we read that as well. Because in special metaphysics, it's like metaphysics are purely a priori, that is rational. It comes from the mind without empiricism. That's what it means. But that is not enough. Because you have to start to build an understanding of how nature works. You have to start looking at nature, of course. So that's what they call the first principles and second principles, right? You take a step. You go closer and closer to nature. And they say that it's a good idea to do the same in ethics. You start from the pure abstract, a priori thinking, and then you move closer and closer to actual people. They call it anthropology, right? That's the study of peoples. Right, now Kant overstood possible... Wait. Oh yeah, I remember we were looking at this yesterday. But I rejected both of these, and so did the text, those examples. In the theoretical case, I must have scrolled way off. Alright, metaphysical just in case. He says that a transcendental principle is one through which the universal a priori condition under which alone things can become objects of our cognition at all is represented. By contrast, a metaphysical principle is one that represents the a priori condition under which alone objects whose concepts must be given empirically and can be further determined a priori. Damn it. Right. Notably, he goes on to offer an example, identifying a transcendental principle, what is in effect the second analogy, and identifying as a metaphysical principle what is in effect the second law of mechanics. Here then, at least Kant seems to think it is only the special metaphysics that is properly metaphysical. The general metaphysics as transcendental philosophy seems merely a prelude. Yeah, and I have that same criticism now again. And this text kind of seems to want to differentiate between the terms, right? It's very black and white thinking in this text. Seems merely as a prelude. Like, if it's a prelude, then it's part of metaphysics. Alright. What do we have here? Banana Wolf Monkey says, speaking of the trolley problem. Let's check this out. Alright. Can I zoom in? I guess that's fine then. Am I facing the way? No. What would you do if Mirror of Calandra dropped, but it would be 30 seconds from you, but there would be a murder happening outside of your window, and which you can't stop at the same time as this drop happens? Nice. Welp, time to pick up that mirror. Mirror, duh. Bitch gonna die. Wouldn't stop a murder even without the mirror. Nice. I'ma mind my own damn business. Yeah, I'm not going near a murderer. I don't want to die and lose my mirror. Nice, I like that. That's actually an interesting trolley problem version. Stopping a murder happening 30 seconds out. I'm not... I might be in oh, no, ha 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 situation here. Right, if it's just a random stranger murdering a random stranger. I mean, I would call the police. But I'm probably not going near the murderer. That's a variation of the trolley problem in another route. What would you do? Would you stop the murderer? I would probably pick up the phone and call the police before the mirror, though. But I'm not such a big... I'm not that invested. I mean, it sounds weird. I know I've played a lot of Path of Exile and I love the game, but I'm just not super invested in the loot, if that makes sense. But you know me, I've spent most of my recent foray into Path of Exile in Solo Self-Found. And in Solo Self-Found, the mirror is kind of worthless. Right, though Kant is not always so restrictive in his use of the term metaphysics, of course his inclination to be so here is telling. Wait, was he that? Right, a transcendental principle is one through which the universal a priori condition under which alone things can become objects of our cognition at all is represented. Oh man. I don't like quotes from Kant. He was such a cunt, it's difficult to read them. Alright, by contrast, a metaphysical principle. Alright, we're talking about the difference between transcendental and metaphysical principles. It's one that represents the a priori conditions under which the alone objects must be given empirically. Can be whose concepts must be given empirically and can be further determined a priori. But actually, I'll just take your word for it. Banana Waffle Monkey says, not totally worthless. You can bender it for an exalt and a divine orb. Well, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I would... Of course, what I would do, I would stop playing Solo Self-Found, sell it, and buy all my gear. You can leave solo self-found, and I mean, I would. So, though Kant is not always so restrictive in his use, his inclination to be here so is telling, for it reflects, I think, his apparent view that though general metaphysics must precede special metaphysics, there is an important sense in which the true telos, so to speak, of metaphysics is found only in the latter. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. We talked about that yesterday. It makes sense. After all, general metaphysics tell us that nature is a lawful order and so amenable to scientific investigation. But it does not yet tell us what this order is. No, it just tells us that it is. It tells us, among other things, the natural objects are substances standing in reciprocal causal relations. Yeah, this is very interesting, because not everybody agrees, which I find that nonsensical. I cannot wrap my head around that, but some people, I have to concede that some people disagrees with that, right? Libertarian free will, for example, because this leads to determinism, reciprocal causal relationships. That is determinism in a nutshell, and not everybody agrees, but well, I do, I suppose. We don't have to argue that. But it does not yet tell us which substances or which relations. In order to cognize these further things, that is, in order to cognize just not the lawfulness of nature, but nature's laws, we must supplement the purely a priori general metaphysics with an impurely a priori special one, realizing or instantiating the former in the latter. Yeah, we're just repeating ourselves again. It's just a repetition, again saying the exact same thing. It is here and only here Kant thinks that we've moved beyond the possibility of natural science to its actual practice. Yeah, we didn't read these exact words, but I read this exact sentiment like 3 times yesterday, at least. Right, return then to the introduction of Metaphysics of Morals, though Kant does not use the same language here as he uses in the preface of the Metaphysical Foundations. I think he is clearly signaling that the structure of the metaphysics articulated in the former work mirrors the structure of the metaphysics articulated in the latter. And that makes sense to me. That actually makes sense, and that's why I said what I said yesterday as well, right? That the terminology of calling it the metaphysics of morals also makes sense, because it's mirroring that you build a foundation purely a priori. The foundation is completely different, but it's still, it has a different purpose. But it's still the same methodology. There we go. That is to say, there is a general metaphysics of morals that lays out universal moral principles, which govern free action in general, as well as special metaphysics of morals that takes those universal moral principles, applies them to an empirical concept of a particular kind of action, and lays out laws governing that kind of action in general. That doesn't seem like a mirroring of the thing. Which govern free action in... Yeah, that I reject this. This is not... govern free action, right? Something that governs free action, like a law, that is just metaphysics. That's not metaphysics of morals, right? Take, for example, I cannot just go outside and jump to the moon. Just jump to the moon. I cannot do that. That is not a free action for me to make. And that is metaphysical, but right? That is not even a priori, right? That's empirical knowledge. There are no a priori. It is not possible to find any a priori free actions in general. I mean, the only thing that I cannot do is go again, like... The only way we could find something here is to create a paradox. I cannot make the opposite action of the action that I am currently doing. That kind of paradox. Those would be a priori non-free actions, so to speak. The rest is empirical, so no. The metaphysics of morals is kind of how one can do morals, just like one. The metaphysics of physics just say there are objects. Just like metaphysics of morals can say there are actions, there are free actions. Actually, I don't even want to use the word free here. There are actions.
It's very realistic, and you could even get the heavy breathing and panting of the tall-chopping male chicks.
Right. There are actions, and these actions can be judged through a lens of morality or ethics. That is what we can say. Right. As well as special metaphysics of moral that takes those kind of universal moral principles, applies them to the empirical concept of a particular kind of action, and lays out laws governing that kind of action in general. Yeah, where if they want to draw this black and white line, as they do all the time, I disagree of where that line is drawn. I would definitely say it has to be drawn at a different positioning in the scale of, right, when you go from the meta to the real. Right. Again, while the general metaphysics is wholly a priori, the special metaphysics is not, since it makes essential use of the empirical concept vis-a-vis human action. Yeah. The result is an impurely a priori metaphysics of morals, one that tells us that we can know a priori about human morality, the laws of human action in general. Confuses me a little bit. If this is right, then it is clear that the account of the metaphysics of morals provided in the metaphysics of morals is quite different from that typically drawn from the groundwork. For it is clear here, even if it was not there, that the metaphysics of morals is not and cannot be cleansed of everything that may be only empirical that belongs to anthropology. Yeah, I kind of disagree. On the contrary, Kant insists here on the role for empirical anthropological consideration within the scope of metaphysics itself, and not merely in the application of a completed metaphysics to the special case of human beings. Yeah, just read this yesterday as well. It's just a repetition. Again. I don't think it's necessarily at odds with the groundwork. I agree with that. It is not. If one maps the metaphysics of morals distinction between general and special metaphysics onto the groundwork's distinction between stage of metaphysics that provides the first principle of ethics and the stage of metaphysics that provides the seconds, there need be no contradiction at all. Exactly, that's what I've been saying. For we can now see in providing the first principles of ethics, the moral law, the groundwork is simply executing the pure general metaphysics of morals, in which case Kant's cleansing claim makes perfect sense. Yeah. But this kind of metaphysics must be supplemented by another, an impure and special metaphysics that affects the transition from the first to the second principles by applying the first principles to an empirical concept of human action. Or evaluating an empirical concept of human action through the first principle. Right? You don't have to... Right? We've been talking about that before. One way to generate ideas and knowledge and whatnot is from first principles, where you take first principles and you build upon that. But that's not the only way to do it. You can look empirically on something that happens, and then you can derive and like evaluate it from first principles, right? You go from, let's say, top down to bottom up. You can do both ways, right? This is the task of the metaphysics of morals. Alright, so that's what we're saying, though, is that Kant's book, The Metaphysics of Morals, is him trying to generate the metaphysics of morals. He's trying to generate concepts of human actions, right? Yeah. Generate laws from the first principles, which is fine. I'm not very good at that myself. I'm better at the flip side of that coin, but thus we can understand that the groundwork and the metaphysics of morals as complementary in exactly the way that the first critique and the metaphysical foundations are complementary. The metaphysical project initiated the former is completed only in the latter. Yes. Alright, Consequently, I think we can conclude, as we did in the theoretical case, that though the general metaphysics must precede the special metaphysics, it must be... I don't agree that that was a conclusion. That was an opinion. That is one way of doing it, right? In the theoretical case, that general metaphysics must be primary to the special metaphysics. It doesn't have to precede. That's what I just said, right? You can do it top down, bottom up. But there is an argument to be made to have it top down, right? That whatever structure you create, it should make sense from a top-down version. The true telos of this metaphysics is found only in the latter. And the true point, I guess. For again, the general metaphysics in effect tells us that the object of the science is a lawful order and so amenable to scientific investigation. Right. Here again is where me and the text are definitely at odds. Drawing an equal sign between the law of man, I mean the text we have, like the law book, the text in the book, and the laws of nature. They are amenable to scientific investigation, but they are nowhere near similar. Right? They are completely different, these two types of laws. And again, I would probably argue for another semantic way to put that. Either changing the name of laws of nature. Actually, yeah. Change the name. Let's not call them laws of nature. That is it. We call them facts of nature. No, that's not it either. Sorry. Not facts. Theories. We call them theories, like the theory of gravity, the theory of evolution, the theory of Big Bang. We call them theories, not laws. we have a theory that the theory of gravity is then when we toss something up in the ground, up in the air, it will fall down to the ground. That's the theory of gravity. That's not the law of gravity, it's the theory of gravity. Then we can call what people do laws. Because this misunderstanding that happens here, or this equation of the two different types of laws, is just unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable. But it does not tell us what this order is. Right. So in the practical case, the groundwork is as an exercise in the general metaphysics of morals, tells us that freedom is a lawful order, subject not to the law of natural causality, but the law of rational causality, the moral law. More specifically, in the guise of the categorical imperative, it tells us that free actions, or their maxims, must be universal, rightly related to rational nature, and consistent with the autonomy of the will. Alright, is this where my misunderstanding happens? Where my rejection of that thing, is this... Alright, whatever my actions are towards you, there are... Right. We can, if we look at it like this, we can look at interactions between man and object. That's physics, right? Tossing something up in the air, seeing it to fall down. And then we have limits to what can happen. Then we look at the interactions between person and person, where I can say stuff to you, and that can lead to specific emotional reactions in you. But there is a limit, right? I can have an intent of generating some sort of emotional reaction, but it might not be doable. Oh man, that is difficult for me to wrap my head around, because I look from a psychological standpoint. I've gone like in my personal life, I've been taking some stuff from the Stoics. Something that the Stoics says, the thing that I took anyway from my real life, is that any emotion that you have is generated from within you. But if you tell me that I am ugly or whatever, you tell me something mean and I feel bad about that, it wasn't you who generated the bad feeling. It was my perspective of what you said. Also, I cannot control what you say or don't say. I might want to try to tell you not to say that anymore. But I cannot do that. The only thing I can do from a stoic perspective is, right, I can express my emotions and say, that hurt my feeling. I wish you wouldn't say that anymore. But I cannot enforce my will upon you. There is no way of doing that. Not at the very moment. I can stop you from saying stuff, right? I can gag you so you can't say it anymore. But I cannot change you from thinking it or having the intent of saying it. That's philosophically speaking. Practically speaking, I can. Right, through torture and breaking you and just actually through, it doesn't even have to be torture, like through pure behaviorism, I can change your behavior, and the assumption is that I am changing your intent as well. So are we talking... But that... No, we run into the problem, right? It's not... How could we make an a priori or like special metaphysics on that, right? It would take some psychology knowledge. But from the psychology knowledge, when we look at it, we see that every person is different. So you cannot create an a priori moral law that holds true for any interaction between agents. Well, I guess that would be the law, that when I act, I cause reactions within you, emotional reactions. That's very... I mean, it's very abstract, but that is kind of the point, I guess, since we're trying to reach the pure a priori stuff. Is that, what can we say? An actor can make an action directed or indirectly, right, upon, or direct or indirectly upon another actor. And that will influence the second actor, will have a perspective and change their own behavior in accordance to the first. Ah, this is confusing. So the question becomes then, how could one build any code of ethics based on that? I don't see how that is really doable. Well, no, you don't build ethics on top of that, right? The ethics that you build have to take that into consideration, right? That must be the lowest point. That just like there are objects acting on each other, so is there actors acting on each other. And those do not... Right, it's a different part of reality. And we can go the behavioristic route and treat us all like, you can look at it from the lens of metaphysics of physics. Right, you can take vibrations created by the vocal cords and whatnot, and you can make them hit the eardrums, vibrate, create neurological responses. Right, you can just go back and forth doing it purely physical. But when you're talking about behaviors, these behaviors, right, that there is an abstraction of what we're talking about. If I say I'm angry at you, that it would be a mistake. Not a mistake. No, it's not a mistake, but it's, if we're interested of the essence of what is happening there, we're not looking, like, the physics is not the way to look at it. It is the behavior and the intents and the abstract ideas that exists within a person's mind that is interesting to explore. So even though we... But that, it's still... Or we don't have to know metaphysically if they're actually the existence of an actor or no, that doesn't matter, because that is not in the scope of this type of morality. That is just in the scope of metaphysics of physics. If actors really exist, you know, the idea of the philosophical zombie or the automaton. Maybe none of you have intent, but that's not relevant here. Not when we're looking at moral laws. Oh man. This is gonna take a while to swallow this thing, I think. Alright. More specifically, the guise of the categorical imperative, it tells us that free actions or their maxims must be universal, rightly related to rational nature and consistent with the autonomy of the will. This is confusing because I don't completely comprehend how the terms are being used. But it does not tell us which actions or their maxim meet these conditions. In order to cognize this further fact, and so in order to cognize not just the lawfulness of freedom, but freedom's laws, we must supplement the purely a priori general metaphysics with an impurely a priori special one, realizing, alright, it is here and only here that we've moved beyond the possibility of ethical science to the actual practice. Yeah, that's just a repetition where we're in agreement. To wit, trying to do ethics with just the groundworks is like trying to do physics with just the first critique. Oh, so that is the case, yeah. Trying to do ethics with just have the groundwork is just saying that there are actors. But doing actual ethics with it becomes pointless. Yeah, it can't be done. Right, yeah. But it's not supposed to be done. The real scientific work happens only in the sequel. Yep. Now, as I noted in my earlier treatment of the metaphysical foundation, the body of that work is concerned with Kant's detailed discussion of how transition from general to special metaphysics. Actually, what time is it? Yeah, plenty of time left. Wow, that felt like a long time because a lot of stuff happened. Or there was a dense pill to swallow. Hopefully I won't forget about it. I probably will forget about it until tomorrow, or in just 10 minutes from now I've forgotten about that thing. Right. From general to special. He puts in the preface, he will do this by bringing all determinations of the general concept of a matter in general under the four classes of pure concepts of the understanding. What are the four classes? Right. Expounded in the first critique. Right. Given this, one might well expect the body of the metaphysics of morals to consist of parallel arguments in which all determinations of the general concept of a human action in general are brought under the various formulation of the categorical imperative expounded in the groundwork, or perhaps the corresponding categories of freedom expounded in the second critique. That is very interesting, though, right? And I can agree with the structure or what they're trying to do, but I don't think that the categorical imperative necessarily achieves this. there were just a few changes I would want to make it achieve it. So maybe that's just misunderstandings on how it is formulated. Alright, the categorical imperative then is one ought to act along maxims that one would want to will to be the general rule of law. That is the categorical imperative. And like as a pragmatist, I don't concede to that. It's not like a pure rationality. Every situation is... That's the problem, right? Every situation, every actor is its own actor. Every recipient of the act is a unique recipient. I don't see how you could generalize actor and actor in that way. Does that work out? I don't think so. And yet this is not exactly what one finds. First, Kant does not appear to explicate the concept of human action into a detailed way. He explicates the concept of matter. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And second, Kant does not appear to bring this concept of human action, such as it is, under the categorical imperative or the categories of freedom. At least not in anything like the explicit, systematic way he does it in metaphysical foundations. So it remains obscure how exactly he intends, as he puts it, show the practical nature of human beings, what can be inferred from universal moral principles. That said, it is not difficult to interpret the metaphysics of morals as at least attempting such an inference. Here's a sketch of how this might go. Oh, nice. Start with the universal moral principles, which are disclosed by the general metaphysics of morals executed in the groundwork. Oh, that's a problem, isn't it? I haven't read that, and the text... I'm not even sure that the text has presented them. So, does that mean that I would have to open up the groundwork? If that's unacceptable writing. That the text does not stand on its own, you have to read that other one? Or have it as a reference. Well, it's not unacceptable, it's just... For me, it's unacceptable. I want the text to be, right? What are the universal moral principles? Instead of saying where they are disclosed, just disclose them. You could have done that instead of repeating yourself so many times. As I've already said, I think these principles, which I take it are meant to encompass the various statements of the one supreme principle, the moral law, tells us in sum that freedom is lawful order. Alright, that's what they say, right? That is the metaphysics of morals. That we have agency. We do have freedom to act. There are actors that have freedom to act. That I agree with. That maybe that felt so self-evident in my mind that I didn't consider that is a specific point that the text is making. But yeah, right, that would be a first principles. actors with freedom to act, which could be summarized as there are actors. Right. This certainly seems at the fore in Kant's initial statement of the principle in terms of universal law. That makes sense, sure. But of course, Kant does not stop here. Right? Since we're talking about morality, I would take it a step further. That is not enough. That is not enough. If it's an ethical principle, first principle, then it has to be an actor and a recipient who is themselves also an actor. So there has to be actors, not actor. Not singular, but plural. Because without actors, morality becomes useless. If there is only one, the universal law becomes pointless. So there has to be at least two. So there has to be actors. Just like in the Metaphysics, a reciprocal connection between the two. But of course, Kant does not stop there. He continues to spell out the principles in new terms, inviting us to think not just about the content, universality, but the authority that grounds it. Rational nature as an end in itself, as well as ultimate explanation of this authority, autonomy, which reveals that in acting in accordance with the principle, a rational being is simply acting in accord with her own rational nature. And we are not rational beings. Why do you have to put that word in there? Why does that word have to be there? Rational being? Why not a being is simply acting in accord with her own nature? Why does it have to be rational? Because this is not a priori either, right? The being in nature, we're kind of leaving a priori stuff anyway, but this last point is, I think, the most important. Oh, do you now? You think that is most important? Banana Waffle Monkey says, can't help but wonder if that meant something more like sentient back then, or if it's a bad translation. That is a very good point. I was thinking sentient as well. And actually, now that you bring it up again, Banana Waffle Monkey, I think I would have to agree with you that it has to be sentient. If it's not sentient, but if we have an automaton actor or automaton being, then ethics makes no sense. So, yeah, sentience, right. If we take it to mean sentience, we can do that. And I thank you, Banana Wolf Monkey, because we can do that interpretation, and then we follow. That's a charitable interpretation of what they're saying, right? That we can translate this word into sentient. Yeah, I like that. I think the usages. I just think back to when we were talking about the game theory, right? Game theory. And they just always think about rational actors. That's the mistake I get stuck in. But yeah, let's look at it as sentient beings. I like that. Alright, for it makes plain what seems to me the upshot of the groundwork. Wait, and the last point. The most important. For it makes plain what seems to me the upshot of the groundwork, which is that all morality asks of a rational being. or sentient being. Indeed, all it could ask of a rational being or sentient is that that being to be itself, to express in action what it truly is. All right. I think I'm getting it now. Maybe it is good that it repeats it over and over and over again. Or to put the point in imperative terms, what the groundwork really tells us is that rational beings ought always to act in ways that protect and promote rational functioning, their own and others. Right. Sentient beings ought always act in ways that protect and promote rational functionings. Sentient functioning, their own and others. But that's not part of groundwork, right? Now we've already taken the step away from the a priori, right? This is not a priori. This kind of right, sentient functioning, that kind of, to me, that kind of sounds like sentient functioning that looks at sentient functioning like life. But we...
What do you mean, armed? Armed with what? Bad breath, colourful language, feather duster. What do you think?
Right, we could, a priori, we could imagine a sentient being that had no need to uphold its own functioning. We could imagine, let's say God, for example. Two gods, then, that had no need to keep themselves alive or functioning. Right? There is no behavior they would have to make to keep functioning, and they could not, like, let's say a yin and yang god. So they did not have to keep themselves functioning, or others. It would just be like I said before, it would just be interactions between the things that gave rise to reactions, actions and reactions. Maybe that is a function, though. An action and a reaction, is that a function? That could be a function. That's how I would understand it anyway, for it to make sense to me. It's just that protect and promote is the problem, right? So those are the problem that I had problem with. Those are the words that I had problems with. The pro words. Protect, promote, problem. While the functioning thing is fine. Protect and promote, however, kind of implies that that within the nature. Right. But that's maybe where we're going, right? We're taking steps towards the empirical. We're taking steps towards the anthropological. I would say that we do have, right? We have empirical explanation and empirical theories about this stuff that works, that doesn't have to be metaphysical or a priori, right? We have sufficient evidence to say that this is the way living creatures behave. They protect and promote continued functioning of their own and others. Right, suppose this is right. It would tell us something importantly about morality. Would it? Wait. How can it do that? Right. But it would not tell us what morality would bid us do. Alright. I don't have an example. Hopefully we'll get an example of a type of moral thinking or ethical thinking that does not abide, follow, obey this kind of first principle. I would want to see an example of that to see how it breaks it. If it breaks it. If you can break a code of ethics through this. Right, that is, it would not tell us which ways of acting actually protect and promote rational functioning. Sentient functioning. Not in us and not in any kind of rational being. Yep, does not. In order to know this further fact, we must fix the kind of rational being in question. Only when we know what it is for beings of this kind to act, and in particular how their acting bears constitutively and instrumentally on their rational functioning, can we know how it is they should act. That's a problem, though. Right. I don't think you can reach... Oh, no, we're talking about ought, right? We're reaching opinions. That's what we're doing now. We're reaching opinions that after building an understanding... Here we go. After building an understanding how this particular sentient being functions, from that we have opinions how to achieve, right? We generate goals, right? We can say that, well, this being has these goals. We can say that for a fact, and then we can have opinions on how to achieve those goals, how they should act. Banana Waffle Monkey says, lurk, be right back. Alright, see you in a bit then. Right. Good luck. Fighting a boss? Something like that, maybe? Yeah, I like that. I like this, that when you understand the being and its functioning is a little bit vague here, but right? When you understand its goals, right? Because the two gods, in my example, would still have goals, the functioning goals. From that, we can build ideas and look empirically on how one could or should achieve these goals. Yeah, we can look empirically on how one could, and then we can form opinions on how one should. Because there are, in every single situation, there are plenty ways to achieve goals, or fail to achieve goals. And it's not only the goal, like, we're looking at the acts of one being, but it's not only the goals of that being. What is more important, I would say, is the one on the receiving end. What is the goals of the person of the receiving end, right? Person 1 acts, person 2 receives, and what are the goals here? Actually, both goals are important, but usually in ethics we tend to look at the on the receiving end, right? The people who are receiving the acts, because it's setting up restrictions. That is what laws are, right? And that is what is useful. So that is why we tend to do that. But it's also an important point, I guess, to concede that both goals needs to be taken into account. Alright. Put another way, the moral story told by the groundwork does not determine duties, human or otherwise, but only sets the correct parameters for determining duties, human or otherwise. Yeah, I think that's where I made a misunderstanding. I thought that the groundwork set up the categorical imperative, but it doesn't. Right? I think that was a misunderstanding from me, that the categorical imperative does not really do that. It cannot do that, because it only sets the groundwork. It doesn't create it doesn't give any opinions on anything. It just sets the framework from within these opinions can be discussed. Yeah. By telling us which features of a being are relevant to such a determination, vis-a-vis those features that bear on its rational functioning. And said in a different way, because I don't like the wording here, we can say the sentient goals. Yeah, the sentient goals. Or, we don't have to remove the words, but we can enhance them by saying another way to put this rational functioning is saying sentient goals is another way to put it. Not rational like in logical and stuff like that, but as a being who acts, an actor, is another way to put it. An actor's acting and receiving offset acting. Okay. The metaphysics of morals, as I read it, is Kant's attempt to apply such parameters to the case of specifically human beings. Right, because that is very interesting. I would actually go to it further, right? We're looking at we exemplify human beings, but I would want to take it a step further, right? That we can imply and guess the suffering of other beings, right? The goals of other beings. Since we're involving empirical stuff, right? We know that human beings have goals, but we can look at dogs and cats and other actors, other beings as well. We could do that. But I guess a good starting out point would be 2 humans. Because that is easy to... Right, I'm a human, so therefore it's easy for me to recognize what the ideas put forth are. So maybe that is the case. 2 human beings, the actor and the acted upon, or whatever. Welcome back, Banana Wolf Monkey. How did it go? Hope it went well. It is to that extent an anthropocentric specification of the general rational end of rational functioning. Generic. Yeah, okay. I'm happy with this. Now, judging from the structure of the metaphysics of morals, it seems that the first fundamental fact about human action that Kant emphasizes is such action that admits of a distinction between our outer and inner, external and internal. Right, here we go in then and start building building upon, right? An actual ethic. We have created the groundwork, and now we're going to looking at Kant's actual ethics. Right. These fundamental facts are... Right. First, we can argue if they are indeed good facts to use. We can also have different opinions of how important they are. And if these goals are we can make judgments about if we agree how important or less important, right? We make value judgments about these things. But what Kant cared about was something he emphasized. Such an action admits of a distinction between outer and inner, external and internal. By this he seems to mean that human actions can be considered in two respects, with respect to their worldly existence and effects, and with respect to their psychological causes or determining grounds. Alright, it's just... Yeah. Physical and psychological. I'm not even sure I would go that route. I would probably only go psychological. Right, let's say, what would be an example of worldly existence and effects? But all of those, whatever they may be, and if you give me a gift of a material thing, that will cause a psychological response. And I think that the psychological response would be what matters. Right, and that would be my way of looking at things. Right, you can look at a person and just see how much money they get, right? Just look at the material acquisition of goods, for example. But I don't think that's very interesting, because you can have a person like that being very happy and content with their life, and you can have a person like that just trying to fill a void and just failing miserably and feeling terrible their whole lives. So I think these are interesting just in the way that they look at the abstract understandings, right? Because these things, we're getting closer to the physics part, like the materialistic parts of things. And that's the metaphysics of physics, not of ethics, I would say. Consequently, human action is subject to two kinds of evaluation. One key to the external, abstracted from the internal. Okay. They're saying exactly what I'm saying, yeah. Abstracted from the internal, and one key to the internal, abstracted from the internal. Wait. Oh, wait. Are we talking about the actor and the receiver of the acts now? I'm confused. This more or less is the principle which Kant divides metaphysics of morals into two parts. The doctrine of right, concerned with external evaluation, and the doctrine of virtue, concerned with the internal evaluation. Oh, right. I was misunderstanding it first. It is the distinction, right? We have the goals of me as the actor and you as the recipient, right? The doctrine of right is you as the recipient. The doctrine of virtue is me as the actor. That's my understanding anyway. That makes sense. So, as Kant says in the introduction of the doctrine of right, which is the recipient, the concept of right has to do only with the external and indeed practical relation of one person to another, insofar their actions as deeds have direct or indirect influence on each other. Exactly, yeah. Such influence matters morally because, again, it bears on our rational functioning. Yes, it affects you, yeah. This is perhaps most obvious in the case of the body. Cutting someone's leg off. Or biting someone's leg off. There we go. I'll bite your legs off. Right. The fundamental way in which we humans function as rational agents in the world, and moreover, the fundamental way in which we can affect each other's rational functioning, is through the use of our bodies. Agreed, yeah. Thus Kant thinks morally, which is protective of rational functioning, must protect our use of bodies, a protection captured by Kant's account of our one innate right, the right to freedom. That is freedom of using our bodies, right? Not being tied down physically. Right. I mean, a lot of people like that, right? That is, so if we're trying to generate rights from our metaphysics, if, let's say, sentient will, we do have that sentient will to move wherever we see, wherever we please. We definitely have that within us as humans, right? Everybody has that. I want to do this, I want to do that. We have a want. We have goals, we have this and that. And we don't want them restricted. So that makes sense to build an ethic based on that. Freedom to use our bodies how we see fit. And that we can act in the world through the use of other bodies too. Both of persons and things, and we get the categories of acquired right, property, contract, and status, sorry. Wait, how do you get from here to there? Alright. I use my body to set a machine to do some work. I can spin up a server, for example. I can spin up a factorial server and keep that running. And that would be the use of my body. So we can extend the use of my body to the property, right? I own the server, so, right, that is part of my... ethically, I should be able to do that. Alright. Contract, let's see here. Use of other bodies too, both of persons and things. Alright. That I'm not so sure I agree with. What gives me... How do we derive that? My body using your body. But that is infringing of... That is possibly infringing on your... Right? On your body. So, oh fuck, damn it. Oh, nice. We can, however, come to an agreement that... Wait, how is that acting from my body? I'm thinking contracts, right? I'm thinking about contracts. That... I will have you act something out. Acquired right. I don't understand. How can we get to it without creating a paradox? Yeah, if that is the basic stuff we go from, that the body, my method of agency, that this will necessarily infringe of yours. I don't see how you could get me to do anything without that is being part of your right and not mine. Status, I have no idea. That's probably this is probably some old slavery ideas. Right? This was written, like, we're talking about the 1700s. Yeah, some old slavery ideas, where some people have higher status than others, and therefore are more worth than others. Maybe? Because these two are... I don't see. Alright. Taken together, these rights delimit spheres of effective agency among embodied beings occupying a common world. Right, maybe if we have a common goal. But then we don't need a No. Here we go. If we have a common goal, if you and me want to achieve that, we've talked it through and we want to achieve the exact same thing, then we can divvy up the responsibilities. You do thing A, I do thing B, and together we achieve... Right, we were talking about the goals, right? That are our goals, why we are using our bodies. And we have both used each other. You have used my body, I've used your body. That's a contract, right? Because we're both gaining something from it. That's how you can derive the contract. There is... You and me have similar or the same goal, right? It doesn't matter, right? We both want to see this contract fulfilled. That is our goal. So that actually makes sense, yeah. Status, I don't know. Alright. Like they say, occupying a common world. That's... We should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the two gods, yin and yang. They have to occupy the common world. No, we did say that, right? They interact with each other. So that we have been... It's been there before. Right. Where the doctrine of rights cares simply about what we do, the doctrine of virtue cares also about why we do it. This brings the internal aspect of action into view. And so on Kant's account, the ends to which our actions are directed. How can we make... Well, of course we do opinions on that thing, yeah. Thus, Kant thinks that morality concerned with rational functioning must prescribe ends, the pursuit of which allows us to see ourselves as effectively realizing that functioning. Such a prescription is captured, for example, by Kant's account of obligatory ends. As I understand it, this account starts from a view of human nature in which the pursuit of happiness, your goal, right? That's a big thing, but the pursuit of your goals, the ordered achievement of our various natural ends exactly, is the prime venue for the development of rational agency. Though we do not originally pursue happiness in order to develop ourselves, it is through the pursuit of happiness that we do in fact develop ourselves. Thus, morality does not tell us to abandon happiness, but to transform it so that what makes us happy also makes us good. In the sense of rational well-functioning. The two obligatory ends mark the different way of achieving this aim in the case of self and other. Yeah, exactly. But I would stress this point, the transform. Right? You do not choose what you want out of life. I've just said that multiple times. But if I put a piece of licorice in front of you, you might like it and want it, or you might not like it and not want it. That's not under your control. Right? What you want is, right, that's just what you want. That's part of your personage. That's not really under your control. What is under your control is your perspective of how to achieve the things that you want. And that would be the transformation. Your perceived notions on how to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And that would be based on, of course, the well-functioning or this... it's not only your goals, right? That's what we're talking about. It's not only your sentient goals, but everybody else's sentient goals as well. So you want to achieve your goals and everybody else's in an optimal situation. When you achieve your goal, that would be in a benefit for everybody else. That's a win-win situation, right? That would be the optimal goodness from this this way of thinking. Yeah, in the case for the self and other, exactly. So that is virtue and right. So far, I kind of like this as the basis for any ethic. And you could probably, especially, oh man, I wish the text could do that. Give some example of how this, right? I know that's about tearing someone else down, but it would be to exemplify what we're trying to build, right? What is an example of some theory not doing this? And can we see why it should be done this way in that type of comparison? I would want to see that, yeah. There is, of course, much more to say in distinguishing the external and internal aspects of action, in emphasizing our embodiment and our orientation towards happiness. I mean, happiness can be other words here. Contentment, success, and fulfillment, and fancy buzzwords that we use today that has probably just replaced happiness from Kantian times. Kant has moved down a level of abstraction. Yeah, exactly. And that's the goal, right? Moving further and further down the level of abstractions. Over the course of the metaphysics of morals, he will want to move down further still, exploring increasingly determinate conceptions of human practical nature and showing how they bear on rational functioning. Yeah. And the further down we go on human practical nature, right, the more divergent we will become. Right? And that's kind of the point with this structure, with this metaphysics of ethics, metaphysics of morals, is to create a framework where we have the same framework and then we can diverge. But we can still be in agreement that this is how this is the primary knowledge we have to go from. What makes this? Oh, I love this song. Nice. Tentacle. Oh. There. Oh, I thought it was going to be more drummy. Like that. That's what I was expecting. Right, but here it's like we move down a level of abstraction, and every step we take down in the level of abstraction, that is opinionated, right? But the top level, right, at the top level of abstraction, which I think is pretty good. I think everybody can be in agreement that that is what ethics is about. That is what creating a theory of ethics is about. Then we move down a level of abstraction, and this is, right, this would be the place to argue. Right? If you don't like this step down, this kind of distinction about the internal and external, right? Like I did, like I had some things to think about at the start, but I kind of like the distinction that he made, right? It's about others and the self. That kind of separation makes a lot of sense to me. But you could argue and probably come, if you're the generative, creative sort of mind, you can probably make another type of basis here, empirical basis, when looking at humanity. You can do that.
It's the deep breath before the plunge.
Especially if you have a mind that is well suited for generating stuff from first principles. You can leave Kant's first principles, secondary, his step down, and make your own step down when looking at humanity. You can study psychology and whatnot and find something that suits you and take that as the primary step. And maybe you will end up probably you will end up somewhere else than where Kant is ending up. Conception, alright. Exploring increasingly determinate conceptions of human practical nature and showing how they bear on rational functioning. This is evident, for example, in its clear concern with the fact that the conditions of our happiness are deeply social. Right. That's very interesting that he said this already. I thought this knowledge was kind of newer than this. That our conditions for our happiness are deeply social. That's pretty much how it works, yeah. We've been talking about, like, this was... How old is the idea of the clinical depression? Something that is pretty much in agreement is that, well, the biggest predictor of clinical depression is isolation, right? Social isolation, that is. As he says, only in comparison with others does one judge oneself happy or unhappy. Oh. Well. Lift me up only to tear me down. Well, that's an unfortunate way of looking for happiness, though. This statement I reject. This is a point of contention, right? Here is where my idea of ethics would diverge. Like my empirical understanding, my understanding, my knowledge of how people work, this is not really the route to achieving goals of happiness or well-being. By judging oneself, comparing with others. So here we would probably go our separate ways, right? A comparison that is itself mediated by others' opinions of one's worth. This obviously complicates the way in which the pursuit of happiness can be rationalized, opening up both pro-moral, egalitarian, and anti-moral, inegalitarian possibilities. What does egalitarian mean again? And why do I have so many tabs open? Affirming, promoting, or characterized by the belief in equal political, economic, and social civil rights for all people. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we see indeed. Oh, hello Kiwi Turtles. Nice to meet you. Are you from New Zealand by any chance? How are you doing today? Alright. We're talking about Kantian morals. Kant morals. That's what we're talking about, yeah. We've just built the groundwork of how to build a code of ethics. Like the framework where Kant was trying to say that this is where everybody has to start out when building ethics. And it was a fairly convincing point in my mind. Yeah, of how one has to start, like the top of the tree of ethics, so to speak. And now we're taking steps down to more practical and real life examples, if that makes sense. Kiwi Turtle says, nice to meet you. Also, sir. Oh, I'm a sir, thank you. I'm from the top of Africa. There we go. I was just thinking because the New Zealanders, they call themselves Kiwis. That's their national animal, the kiwi. It's a little bird that looks like the fruit. The berry? Is it a boot or a fruit or a berry? The kiwi. And so it shows, so it should be no surprise that much of Kant's discussion of the doctrine of virtue is dedicated toward managing just these complications, as in his discussion of the duties of love and respect, that is, beneficence, gratitude, etc., and the various vices that oppose them, that is, envy and arrogance, etc. Alright, and here again, I think Kant makes a mistake here. Right? If you're envious of somebody, that's not under your control, right? Becoming envy, wanting something someone else has, that just happens to you. But how you achieve, right? We can say that that generates a goal for you, that you want what they have. And that you can have different perspectives on how to achieve that thing. Maybe you can do your own thing and get your hands on a secondary copy, or you can just go steal it from them. Right? So envy in itself, I would disagree being a vice. I would say that envy in itself is neither here nor there. That's just part of where you are in your life and your feelings. The moral aspect is the step. What do you do with these feelings? Kiwi Turtle says, hey, I see, I didn't know that. Neither did I before I went to visit. Well, just before I went to visit New Zealand. I read up on it before moving there, yeah. Kiwi Turtle says, I found a picture of a turtle made out of kiwi. So I named it. So. Nice. Do you... this picture, turtle made out of kiwi? I'm actually a little bit curious. Alright. If I just search for it. Turtle made of kiwi. Can we find that specific picture, do you think? Oh! Like this? Nice! I couldn't imagine it, but now when I see the picture, yes. Or this one as well. But this one was way cooler. This one was the coolest, right? Alright, and then we can show the kiwi bird and you will understand why it has the name. That is the kiwi bird. It kind of looks like a kiwi, right? I'm pretty sure the fruit came first and then the bird. Yeah, it must be that way. All right. So yeah, I would say that these what Kant would call virtues and vices, I would disagree with. So how would I replace that? Right. Instead of... Yeah, I would say that a vice is not an emotion. It is a thought pattern. Yeah, it's a thought pattern. When you see someone, oh, I want that. Your thought pattern can go, right? We don't have any good names for it. They can go in a malicious route, like, I'm gonna steal it, or in a productive and healthy route, right? I am gonna work hard and make sure I get that thing as well. I'm gonna place that as a goal, and right, you can do... So that would be thought patterns. Yeah, it's not even behavioral patterns, because when we're talking about behavior, well, it becomes a little bit muddled. Maybe it is behavioral patterns as well. No. If we're talking about virtues and vices, it has to be thought patterns. And what follows from the thought patterns are behavioral patterns. We can also talk about behavioral patterns in both, not only about the virtues, but the rights. Right? Your behavior is infringing on the rights of another. If that makes sense. Right, now, describing all of these arguments and especially showing how they might be systemized is a large project, which I cannot begin to undertake here. Oh, that actually makes me happy because, like I said, right, we've already started to diverge, but that's not the point of the text, which makes me happy. I really like the point of the text, right? I offered this sketch simply as proof of concept, yeah, to show how the groundwork and the metaphysics of morals could be understood as executing the two-stage metaphysics I describe, and so how the latter might be thought to realize or instantiate the principles of the former by providing an account of a human sentient functioning goal setting. All right. Again, this text would be so much improved by an example of a failure of achieving this methodology. That would help me immensely. Yeah. And since it's 12:10 and I'm at the end of a bit here, I think it's time for lunch. Yeah, I think it's time to eat. All right. This is actually yesterday when I was reading, and the day before that, it felt like the text was just repeating itself over and over and over again. It feels like all that repetition paid off. Yeah, it paid off. I got a deeper understanding of what was going on. Like the misunderstandings that I had, some of them at least, I probably still have some, but they were ironed out. And I think I get it. I get it, the stepwise levels of abstractions that should be part of ethics for us to be in agreement. So something interesting is to find is an argument against or a different view on the very top. Right, the groundwork, a different type of groundwork would be very interesting to see here. Hopefully, this text will take that up, but I don't think it will, right? It just evaluates Kant in its lonesome. So we probably won't see that. But keeping that in mind for later, which I'm not very good at, but oh well. I had a good time today. I hope you enjoyed yourself. And thanks for hanging out. Have a good one. And see you next time. Cheers.